My name is Pastor Shafer. I am the senior pastor here at Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica, California. And this is Mount Olive's YouTube program called Hope Matters. Each week, we talk to interesting people around the country and even around the world about the theme of hope, hope in their lives, because we believe that we have a God of hope and that hope matters. My guest today is a longtime friend and colleague, Tim Frakes. Tim is an independent videographer in Lombard, Illinois. If you don't know where that is, it's, let's see, Tim, southwest of Chicago, right?
Due west.
Due west of Chicago. And Tim and I worked together for many years while we both worked for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, but Tim is still doing work for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and other projects. So, Tim, I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Thrilled to be here, Eric.
What's a recent project that you've been working on that you're really excited about?
Well, the ELCA asked me to produce a documentary on the life and ministry of Mark and Linda Jacobson. They continue to be missionaries, medical missionaries in Arusha, Tanzania. And it's interesting that they asked me to do this documentary because typically the ELCA doesn't shine the spotlight on its own very often. They typically, institutionally, historically, shine the light on those they serve, especially within the realm of global mission. So if one were to discuss Tanzania from the ELCA perspective, you'd talk to Tanzanians. So I was surprised when they called and asked for a film to be, they commissioned a film to be made on the Jacobsons, who are extraordinary by any measure. Mark and Linda Jacobson attended Johns Hopkins, and Mark is Harvard, did his undergraduate or his medical training at Harvard, and then Johns Hopkins. These are really extraordinary top flight people, but they served in Tanzania during the when they first got there. They were doing public health, but then the HIV/AIDS epidemic unfolded before their eyes. And so their response, the only thing they could do at the time was palliative care, to help people to die. And they did, as we know, by the millions in sub-Saharan Africa. But then through that, they developed 2 hospitals in Tanzania, Selian Hospital, and then from scratch, the hospital in Arusha, which is a world-class institution today. So and they did this not on their own, but they did this in the strictest sense of accompaniment, meaning that they walked alongside the church in Tanzania to develop these medical institutions. And the greatest evidence of this is Rafael Malpica, the head of Global Mission, was telling me this story the other day, which will appear in the documentary. He said that at some point in the early 90s, they got a phone call at Global Mission, and Mark had been in a car accident, a very serious car accident. So the conversations began immediately. How are we going to get him medevaced out? How, we're going to get him to Europe. Where we get him to the United States? What are the costs going to be? What's the insurance situation like? Very practical, logical. Well, Mark said no. And he placed himself in the hands of his Tanzanian colleagues. He placed his life in their hands. He said, how can we develop this medical institution if when it really comes down to it, I'm just going to be medevaced? And so Mark stayed, and it happily turned out well. But Raphael points out that is accompaniment.
It's accompaniment, yes. And they've been there for more than 40 years, right?
I think 35, but they're still there at COVID. They came back. They're semi-retired. They also helped to start a new medical facility in South Sudan. South Sudan, the newest nation on earth, and they started a hospital, Reconciliation, it's called. They've been going through a terrible civil war. And so Mark and Linda have been deeply involved in that. and they continue to consult with Global Mission. So anyway, that's the documentary we're doing. The second project, besides all the nonprofits in the world are doing their fundraisers virtually, and that means video, and that means it's been an epically busy fall, late summer and early fall. But we're also doing a documentary on locally here on a housing cooperative, which doesn't sound very sexy, but in 1947, an African-American or person of color living in Chicago would not have been able to come here to DuPage County, Lombard, and purchase a home. Things like redlining and restrictive covenants would have prevented them from even probably having a conversation with a realtor, or if they had had one, they had gone to a bank would not have loaned them money. So a group of Christians in Chicago in the late 1940s, after World War II, got together and purchased an old dairy farm that was going defunct. And it was 100 acres of land, and they opened up a housing co-op based on the Rochdale principles. Rochdale is a community in the Midlands of the UK, and they started this housing co-op, and the deal was you didn't own your house, but you owned a stake in the co-op, and anyone could live there regardless of religion, regardless of race, regardless of economic, if you could afford to move there, you could live there. And so they started this housing co-op, and a young attorney for the NAACP who was fighting for fair housing alongside Martin Luther King Jr., wrote a legal brief to the Truman administration advocating for fair housing in the United States, and he uses as an example the York Center Co-op. That attorney was Thurgood Marshall.
Wow.
And that who of course went on to become Justice of the Supreme Court, and that legal brief resulted in executive action which prohibited restrictive covenants. So our little York Center Co-op thrived until 2007, when the property values became so great that some of the owners or members sued, and they got the Illinois legislature to change the local laws, and it's now a homeowners association. So the co-op was ended. But these people helped each other, literally helped each other build their houses. If you moved in, your kitchen was full of food. Like they would get together and do things like that. One guy told me, I've lived in a lot of places in my life. I've only lived in one community. So this is a documentary about community, about what it means to bear one another's burdens. There were Jews that lived there who had survived the Holocaust. There were Japanese that moved there after the internment camps. They couldn't buy a house in DuPage County in the 1940s and 50s, but they were welcome in the co-op. So it's quite an amazing story that most don't know about.
That's a wonderful story, Tim. So both of these projects, when they're finished, there'll be a link from your website to them, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Tell us your website address, please.
Frakesproductions.com. Frakes productions.com.
Right. So and if you go to frakesproductions.com, friends, you'll also find other productions and videos and docs that Tim has made, including some that he and I did together. We've been 3 times, I was thinking about that this morning, Tim. You and I have been together 3 times in the West Bank and Jerusalem, among other places, and and done productions each time. I should tell you, friends, that a few years ago, Tim called me up and said, "It's time for us to do a project together. What should we do?" And that's how we ended up in Jerusalem for the project of the Stations of the Cross, which was really just an excuse to do some work for the hospital and the church, both of which we were very pleased about. And if you haven't seen the Stations of the Cross production that Tim and I did, it is on Mount Olive's YouTube page. Can't miss it. And people are looking at it, so it's wonderful. Well, Tim, as you know, we're talking about hope today, and it's for many people it's a pretty scary time in this country, but you are a person of faith, of deep faith, as I know. And so what gives you hope as you get up this morning?
Well, you mentioned the West Bank, and our mutual friend Mitri Rahib at Bethlehem, Christmas Lutheran in Bethlehem, famously said once that when someone asked him, what are your thoughts on the Middle East conflict? And his response was, I'm not optimistic, but I'm hopeful. And there's a difference. So am I very optimistic these days? I fret a little bit, but my hope is grounded in a faith that transcends current politics, that transcends national identity, that even transcends family. It's a great cloud of witnesses, and a belief that that I'm involved in a kingdom, right? And that service in that kingdom is eternal. So am I hopeful? Yeah, I am hopeful, because I know whose I am. Who holds my hand, who holds my future, and I don't like to get uber pietistic, but it's true. I mean, if you're staring into the abyss and you say, what does this all really matter? Well, it's a matter of faith, and so by faith, I am hopeful, based on evidence, not very, but it's faith, and I don't need proof to believe. Actually, our friend and colleague Kurt Reichert, my early days with the ELCA, I was still very much influenced by my fundamentalist roots, and I still am today. But back then, it informed more of my identity. Anyway, I was debating with Kurt Reichert at lunch, some religious topic. I can't even remember what it was. But Kurt said, I have more faith than you do. And I found this strange because, Kurt had some very liberal ideas about the inspiration of Scripture and the reality of heaven and hell, and some of these ideas. And so I thought, well, that's ridiculous. How could you possibly have more faith than me? And his answer really influenced me, and it was that you have to have it proved. I don't. I just believe. And that really stuck with me. And when you combine that understanding with our friend, the late Herbert W. Chilstrom, he had a great motto for the ELCA in its early days, and I've adapted it to my personal theology. So I'll repeat it personally as opposed to corporately, but that I want to be so deeply and confidently rooted in the gospel of God's grace that I'm free to give my life joyfully in witness and in service. I am so deeply and confidently rooted in that grace that all of these things that drive me nuts, watching the news, watching the debate last night, I'm actually free from the anxiety and the angst and fear, frankly, that generates. And I'm then free to give my life away joyfully in witness and in service. Hope I'm not being repetitive.
That's fine, Tim. Thank you. I think we actually have addressed our topic today very well. Thank you so much. I so appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and joining our Hope Matters team of interviewees. And we've had some fun with these interviews and some great meaning. And today was one of the latter, and a little fun too. So if you'd like to know more about Tim's work in production, frakesproductions.com, right, Tim?
Correct.
Frakes Productions, all one word.com. And you can find out more about Tim's past projects, including ones he's done for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and some that he's done with me for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America and for our congregation back in Pennsylvania. And so, Tim, it's always good to talk with you. You've been a friend and a colleague for, it would be going on 28 years. 'Cause I don't think I met you before I came to Chicago, so I can tie it to a date. I met some of our colleagues, as you know, when they came to Pennsylvania, because we were doing large screen assemblies before others were. But I think that you and I met when I came to Chicago, and then you officially joined the staff under my leadership at that point. So and I've watched your family grow up. I've held your baby children who are now adults, including 2 military vets. Are they both police officers now, or Tim?
Well, both are still active duty soldiers. One is in Fort Bragg, North Carolina with the 82nd Airborne, jumping out of planes, recently returned from Afghanistan. And the second is a police officer, but he's also a military police, and his unit got called up, and he's on his way to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where he'll be serving his country as the 9/11 trials unfold.
Wow, what a dramatic, what an incredible experience you'll have with that. And your daughter is involved in helping professions also, correct?
Well, she's mostly a stay-at-home mom with two of my grandsons, and her and her husband live in town, and she's a special ed teacher, but on hold that career with motherhood at the moment.
Well, it's I'm so proud of you and your family, and proud to call you friend. So thank you. All right, thank you, folks. Thank you for being with us today on Hope Matters. This is a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica, California. I'm Pastor Eric Shafer, the senior pastor at Mount Olive. Our guest today was Tim Frakes of Frakes Productions of Lombard, Illinois, a longtime friend. And we are doing this program and we are doing these interviews because we believe we have a God of hope, and we believe that hope matters. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.